Welcome once again to Andrew White. And we're going to tackle a very difficult subject today, and many have tried, but we will hopefully not fail. Most people have heard of the two-state solution. It's a bit complicated at one level, anyway, and very simple at another level. And we're going to go back, Andrew, if I may ask you for a bit of history, because one thing we hear from Hamas and the Palestinians, they've been in the promised land for centuries. Is that true?
We really don't know. There's not one type of people called the Palestinians. They are most likely to have come from the group that fought Goliath, who were called the Philistines. And the nearest thing to the Philistines is the Palestinians. And Goliath had a problem with the Philistines, and Goliath was dealt with by a little shepherd boy called David, and the little shepherd boy was uneducated. He just dealt with sheep on the field, and he got his sling and a few stones, and he managed to deal with the evil Philistine. And this is the kind of relationship we've seen biblically and historically. I do not think that the promised land just belongs to the Jews of the land. I think it belongs to all the people of the land. If those Philistines or Palestinians are really people of the land, like many of my Assyrian friends in Iraq, they had their first 15 bishops of the Syrian Orthodox Church when it was established in about the year 1000. They were all considered the Jewish bishops. And so the Jews were originally the leaders of the church as well as the other state. And then it's not until 1947 that we had the establishment of the State of Israel, which is a direct result of people reacting to the Holocaust. Weizmann people started the Zionist movement 100 years before, at the end of the last century, the century before last. And it's very interesting to see how some of those people's grandchildren have been the recent presidents of Israel, including now. But with this terrible situation in Gaza, everybody is turning on the issue of what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians. And they seem to have forgotten the reason we had this war was because on the 6th of October, over 1,000 Israelis were killed by the Hamas militants sending their bombs. Israel didn't start this war, but Israel is passionately saying, how can we bring this to an end. If we just say two-state solution, we're saying we will legitimize the evil terrorists of Hamas and give them a state, because whether you like it or not, Hamas is a significant section of the so-called Palestinian community. And Netanyahu is saying quite clearly, if you, President Biden, is saying we must have the two-state solution, you cannot give us any more weapons, which happened last week, we cannot survive. Well, frankly, I've been right involved in this process from the time of the Oslo Accord. I was working as the intermediary between Ariel Sharon and Yasser Arafat. They weren't talking to each other, but they communicated. How did they communicate? Through me. Nobody knew who I was. All they knew was that they had a secret person that both sides trusted. Both the Israelis and the Palestinians both trusted me. When we worked on this declaration and this important agreement, the key people was Ariel Sharon and Shimon Peres, and the president of my organization, who is the chief rabbi of Oslo, of Norway. His father was chief rabbi of Denmark, his grandfather was, his great-grandfather was, his great-great-grandfather was, and now the chief rabbi of Denmark, do you know who it is? His son. So these patriarchal systems have existed in the life of Israeli community from before there was a state, from the time of Abraham right down to the present. And we still see these incredible relationships, and we cannot deny the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying time and time again, there can be no peace with a two-state solution. And the reality is that this is absolute reality. This time, we're not seeing any real peace opportunity with this so-called two-state solution. If we were, it would bring hope. I have never been a believer in the two-state solution, purely because for me, my understanding of the situation historically has to be biblically based. It's only when we look in scripture of the 3,500 years of the history of the Hebrew people that we can see what's really going on. And it is a real crisis now. And it is a real crisis what is happening to the people of Rafah refugee camp in Gaza. And for me, it's very difficult because I am intimately linked with the Christian community in Gaza, and there was a small one, not a big one. There's no more than 1,000 Christians in Gaza, but they are there. They are the only people who could have found a peaceful solution. One of our great peaceniks was a person who was one of the founders of Hamas. I worked with him for years, and he eventually became a peacenik. And he could have really been somebody who could have brought about a difference. But there aren't many people like him. And he has now fled the scene. He has said, there's no way of us finding peace here. And he wants to leave for Turkey because he says he can't go anywhere else. He was a member of the Islamic Brotherhood. You see, all of these people, they've got a history of not being good guys, but of being bad guys. And one of the reasons Yasser Arafat gave in to Hamas, allowing them to try and establish a leadership in Gaza, was because they would not comply with the demands of Fatah, which was the Yasser Arafat political party. And so you've got a total disagreement on the Palestinian side and a total disagreement on the Israeli side about two-state solution. This is not a situation that can be solved by two states.
One goes back thousands of years, Andrew, and there'll always be enmity, according to the Old Testament, between Jew and Arab, and that has come to pass. The other thing to be borne in mind is the fact that Netanyahu certainly is convinced that unless he gets rid of every trace of Hamas, i.e. in their last city stronghold in the south, it's going to be disaster. It'll come back in the future. Therefore, we have to accept that some innocents will be killed.
It's the whole controversy of the just war theory. How just is the just war theory? War, even in the just war theory, always hurts people. And all we can do is pray, come, Lord Yeshua, come. Because that's the only solution. In the Jewish religious sense, they would say they just pray for the coming of Mashiach ben David, the kingly Messiah. You know, in Judaism, there's a belief that there will be two Messiahs, Mashiach ben Yosef, the servant Messiah, and Mashiach ben David, the kingly Messiah. Now, when you look at Christian theology on the Messianic kingdom, we believe exactly the same. We believe that Jesus was a servant Messiah. And when he returns, he will be the kingly Messiah.
The young people around the world, and especially in Britain, appear to be being hijacked, either through universities, either through teaching at schools.
And there's an increasing anti-Semitism. The UJS, Union of Jewish Students, are really scared. And Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has called a meetings of all the university vice chancellors to say we must protect our Jewish students. And even in Parliament Square, they've set up Palestinian camps. And who's setting them up? It's not the Palestinians. It includes people like the students of my alma mater at Cambridge and Oxford. So in a very dire situation, and we continue to pray as Psalm 122, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they who love her prosper, and I don't think there is any answer to hating her. We've seen that before.
I was watching yesterday a film that came out of the West Bank in particular, and Gaza indeed itself. And they showed the Palestinians and how they behaved, how they brought up their children. And all I can say is that it was hate. They are taught to hate. Now, is that the same on the Israeli side?
It's not the same at all, but in recent years there has been a similar mentality amongst the radical settlers. And some of the radical settlers from the time of that chap Goldstein who blew up and killed all those people in Hebron. What was that, 20 years ago? And he wasn't an unintellectual. He was a doctor. And yet there are those who've been taken on by radical extremism of Rabbi Kahana and others, who basically said, this is our land and we must protect it come what may. But they are an absolute minority of Israelis. The vast majority are nothing like that. But unfortunately, the majority of Palestinians in Gaza are like that.
Well, it appears to be not a two-state solution, but a spiritual solution, ultimately. But in the meantime, obviously, lives need protecting. And which is the best way, short-termism or long-termism? Long-termism was to say, well, we've got to get rid of every last remnant of Hamas. Short-termism is to say, let's give way to them, give them what they want.
I think we have got to get rid of them. We have got to get rid of them. Because whilst they are there, there is no more future for anybody. For the Palestinians and the Israelis. And even though it's terrible, but I still think you've got to take radical steps to protect as many civilians as possible.
I'm thinking of Mosul. Nobody said anything about Mosul when British and American troops attacked that situation. And there were many, many more people, innocent people, that died. Nothing was said hardly. But now.
That was terrible. It was absolutely awful. You see, us Brits and Americans and even Europeans, we don't have a good history in war. We did bad things as well. You know, I think of the situation of the bombing of Coventry Cathedral in 1940, 14th of November 1940. We responded against Dresden. What happened to Dresden was 1,000 times worse than what happened to Coventry. And one of the great things about Dresden, I actually taught them the Coventry Cross of Nails to present to them when the Frauenkirche, their big cathedral, was reopened in the early 1990s. And I still think that the incredible story of reconciliation between Dresden and Coventry is the kind of stories that we need to see as hope. We've got to. We've got to keep addressing and looking up continually. And we just pray that in all that we do and where we serve, we can show the real peace of the Lord Almighty.
It's a spiritual battle. We can agree on that. Therefore, it's not a political battle. So what do we do with the politicians?
Love them, love them, and love them. And pray for them, pray for them, pray for them. That is all we can do. But we have got to engage with the politicians. Because where there was true faith and religion in the Bible, there was also always engagement between the religious and political leaders. They have got to work together.
Andrew, thank you so much. We will see you very shortly.
See you soon, my dear friend.